it out on an estate sale, or I'll donate it to the museum for safekeeping. The other thing is that Mary is wearing a vintage dress from her family, and Sandy has a really pretty dress on that she sewed based on a nice Victorian pattern for a lady's everyday dress.
Has outgrown.
Oh. Well, you notice I didn't add that. Well, you know, if you've ever cut an angel food cake, you know that you need a serrated knife. And you have to do it a certain way so you don't mush the cake while you're cutting. But if you've got 20 cakes that have to be cut that are angel food, which is about what we have, suddenly everybody praised the qualities of an electric knife. So here we have just a little humor behind the scenes.
You want to tell the story about the creamed corn cake?
Should I tell the story of the creamed corn cake? The creamed corn cake. Bill and I have never been known for keeping our comments to ourselves. And one year we're up there chopping up cakes, getting ready, and there's a cake in a pan. And I said to him, God almighty, it looks like somebody poured creamed corn over the top. And I'll tell you, you couldn't pay me to eat creamed corn. As one of my friends said, it looks like somebody already ate it for you. Anyway, so unless it's going into scalloped corn, I don't want to deal with creamed corn. Well, anyway, so that isn't bad enough. Now I give it a cut, and I honest to God, I'm just pushing and pushing. I cannot get that cake out of the pan. And when I finally get the first piece out, it takes off. And it was stuck to the pan, and it was just, so we had it sitting off to the side. And of course, as we're going along, you're using it more and more cake, and finally somebody's like, well, why don't you use that cake? And we both said, oh, that's the creamed corn cake. You can't get it out of the pan. Well, the lady on the left had baked it. And she's coming along, and I said, well, that's the creamed corn cake. You can't get it out of the pan. She said, the creamed corn cake? Well, she was just devastated. I mean, we had a good time about it, but she was just put out. Well, I said, here's a spatula, here's the pan, you get it out. Well, it didn't come out for her either. So we had a good laugh about it, but eventually we got it out and served it with all the other pieces. Well, she turns right around and says, good God, look at that cake. Look how crooked it is in the pan, and it wasn't baked real even. Well, that belonged to another volunteer up there that afternoon. So, not to be outdone, I went home.
Very ugly that year.
Yeah. Not to be outdone, I went home that night and made a note, and during the week I went online, and you can type in any recipe and you'll get wonderful results on the internet. I typed in creamed corn cake, and by God, didn't I get a recipe. Which I printed out and sent to her, anonymously. And several months later, about this time of year, I remembered, you know how you know your own home and you just hear when somebody's on your porch or something? And I remembered being in the back side of the house in the den, and I remembered thinking, somebody just came up the front porch steps, but you know what? I just didn't hear anybody knock. And all of a sudden, I heard one little rap, and I went to the door, and there wasn't anybody there. And there on the porch was a box. And I opened the box, and in the box was half of a 9x13 pan. It was the creamed corn cake recipe.
The other half was delivered to my place.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, it was darn good.
It was very good, and it was not a cheap cake recipe. It had a lot of nut meats in it and different fruits. That's right. She's still paying it off. Well, after the successes of the ice cream social, another very big factor in getting the house back to being a place of many happy memories were the Christmas events. This is a picture of the high school show choir a few years ago, posed in their winter regalia.
By Mrs. Worth, I believe.
Was it taken by you, Linda?
Also an excellent photographer.
The Christmas gatherings at the Octagon House, I think, are one of the very big factors. The social, ice cream social gets people out into the yard. It gets people in the area, but not that many of our guests that day go into the house proper. And the evening musicale by the Euterpe Choir only brought in so many people too, sometimes about 100 a year, and it was done every other year. But the Christmas gatherings really set the pace. And it's a mixture of memories. It's the memories of the people who are acting. And in this top picture, you see Sandy Haslow, the dueling knife lady, and Cliff Luke. Now, Bill, that picture says it's the colonial Christmas. Is that?
No, that is Nutcracker.
That's a Nutcracker picture.
Back in 1990, I'm not sure, not 1990, it was later than that, about 1998 or something.
Oh, not that late.
Well, then that'd be 96.
That was the first one I took a part in, so it had to be early
96.
1990s.
96 or something like that.
Well, first of all, a lot of the general public like to come through at Christmas just to see the house and the plays. So they have their memories. The actors have very many memories as well. The friendships they make, the laughter,
Tell stories.
the things you could tell. I think the other thing that's, and you can just leave that, Rochelle. The other thing that's very interesting about the plays is that they're adjusted to the Octagon House. They're unique to Watertown. When Bill writes them, they are very tailored to. Did you want to?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Whisper, W-H-I-S-P-E-R. Bill tailors the plays very well to the house and to the traffic flow, but there are other things that are very unique. You've all known the Nutcracker. It's a timeless classic. Here's Clara. Bill is instructing her. But what's so much fun is the Sugar Plum Fairies. In Bill's version, they get a real chance at life.
Agatha and Beck.
That's right. And here they're fearful, so they're hiding as lamps, and they're wearing lampshades. But it's just wonderful to watch them chatter to each other from room to room. It's just hilarious, and it takes very good timing, and you have to have a real partnership with the opposite actress or actor, because it's got to be split-second timing, and it really makes the day.
And I am wearing the famous drapery dress.
Which is
Oh,
where?
yes, you are.
Yes.
Over here?
That
Yeah.
was made in 1954 for the centennial. Oh,
Out of drapery.
Apparently, I don't know. That's what I was told.
drawstrings.
So we could say it's curtains for you?
But Randy, the first Christmas celebrations up there were not plays. They began when
Right.
Qualms were there in 81, I believe. And they were various different groups that were brought in, and they would each take a different room to decorate in a specific style.
1983 was the first play that was up there. But that Christmas project, that whole process, has really brought people in. The other one I forgot to mention were all the choirs that have come in and caroled over the years in the staircases, and the occasional times that we've had crafters in the kitchen area showing different Christmas hobbies or habits. That also gave people a lot of very unique memories. And Rochelle, if you'd move on to the next picture, here we have Brandon Thompson, who of course has finished his college work now and is very actively working in theater. And we have the dueling knife lady, this time in the role of Christmas Present.
Yes.
I can't help it, you showed up so often. I didn't realize that till tonight. So it's a good thing if you ask
You're
me.
a star.
I
This
know.
carol is done every 5 years.
Another turning point occurred in 1991. We celebrated the 140th anniversary of Mr. and Mrs. Richards' wedding. And believe me, it was like planning a big event. If Judy can tell you, we started planning in late summer of 1990, and we planned it just like a wedding. And it took a lot of time and a lot of organization. The week before the actual event, the weather was horrific. And we knew it had to be outside on the Octagon House lawn, and we had collected wedding gowns from people all over Watertown, spanning the 1991 wedding back to weddings from the 1800s, we had a dress made for the 1841 look. I don't remember if it was the Friday night before the event or a week on the Friday night before, but we had a raging thunderstorm. It started storming at 5 o'clock. It was still blowing and storming at midnight. Judy and I were scheduled to work in the Octagon House that night, and first there was a power outage because an oak tree went down on Western Avenue. But not to be outdone, I went home, I got my clothes changed from the bank, and I stopped at Hardee's for 2 ice cream sundaes, the prerequisite. Judy stashed them in her freezer, and off to the Octagon House we went to put all the clothes and the suits in order, because we had to have all the ladies who were going to wear them and the gentlemen had to be final fitted. So there isn't a lot of electricity in the Octagon House. We knew we needed things from the second floor. We went up the steps, got to a door, we have a bedroom, waited for the lightning, went a little further, and it's a very special memory. I'll never forget it. It's probably the first time since I was 10 that I didn't get scared during a storm. This particular couple I nicknamed Charlie and Emma after my great-grandparents. The bride is wearing a wedding dress which belonged to the wife of Lieutenant Governor Jesse Stone. They were Watertown residents. What's interesting is she had fabric left from her wedding. This has the large sleeves from the 1890s. She wore this as her inaugural gown in Madison. originally the bodice had very tight-fitting sleeves. She had a completely new bodice made to be stylish some years later, and this was from one of the suits in the house collection. Now, the day of the gathering, after a week of rotten weather, and the day before when we were doing our trial run, it was barely 60 and it was still drizzly. Sunday morning dawned beautiful, and it got to be about 72 that day. And this is looking from the front of the lawn. You can see somebody's hair looking into the backyard, going down the hill where we have the food set up for the ice cream social. This whole lawn, all the way up to the street, was full of people. We had almost 700. We had about 50 Richards relatives that came back from throughout the United States. Judy and her late husband, Cy, had written beautiful letters inviting them to come back for this gathering. Some of them changed their vacation plans. And this is Judy Klitzman from the Daily Times. She helped me to moderate it. She's being escorted up to the south porch, and a very young Dan Plitzowite wearing a suit that had been lent to us for the day from somebody's wedding. And then we have a picture. This is one of the models coming out the side of the house. You can see they used the side porch, and they swept through the whole lawn. All the crowd had a really good view, and a lot of the brides stood when their dresses came out so that they could be recognized in the crowd for their lending, for their donation for the day. This is the dress that we had made in from an 1840s pattern. Making it in white was kind of a takeoff on history. Very few brides had a white dress prior to 1900. They had to wear their dresses for many special occasions after their wedding. They usually chose pastel colors unless it was winter time. Even into the early 1900s, brides wore their dresses more than just their wedding day. It was a special dress, and they treated it as such. This was a partial caste gathering. It's all the gentlemen that acted as escorts. There's young Mr. Yankee, young Mr. Roessler. Yeah. I call that wedding, and there's one more picture after that. I refer to the wedding as a turning point because we learned as a group of volunteers that we really could put on large productions up there, that we had the backing in the community, that we had volunteer resources, and God was with us that day in giving us good weather, which never hurts. After those events, we recognized that we could fill out the season up at Octagon House and that there were still other memories to be made for people. And we focused on the end of the season, at the end of October when we're ready to close down the house. This is a gathering of high school students who carved pumpkins, and we haven't had that for a while, but they would light them in the front lawn. It's a very nice presentation up at the Octagon House, just a simple old-fashioned Halloween. One of the neat creations was Dead Emma, something that Bill put together based on house history and loosely and a little slapstick humor. These are some of the actors and actresses from a former run of that play, 98. And of course, we just did it this past autumn. Well, once we had that accomplished and realized that there was interest in the month of October in doing things up there, the next event was Bill's presentation on robbers, rascals, and ruffians. And I don't know if I have those 3 R's in the same order you use them.
Robbers, rascals, and ruffians.
Okay.
That was in 90, no, that was in, let me think now. 94.
What was interesting about this, and it's been since presented or repeated, is that this was one of the first times we did something in the Octagon House that would really fall under the category of a lecture type setting. The guests sat in the parlors, and Bill presented to them narratives, stories, reflections on robbers, ruffians, rascals, and Watertown's old history. But it was very interesting. There was no special music, nobody dancing around, no play going on. It was simply a sit and listen / learn session, and it was very successful. It was very sold out. A few years later, we did Victorian funeral customs. This is a vintage picture of the house right after it became a museum. This is the last wallpaper that the Richards family had up from around 1910. And Rochelle, if you'd skip to the next picture. For the Victorian funeral customs, we put the house into mourning. There's crepe over the door and a black wreath on the door, which was tradition years ago. This coffin was on loan from Pedersen's Funeral Home in Waterloo, and now it's property of their historical society, and they lent it to us again a few years ago. We brought in floral arrangements. The mannequin is dressed in mourning clothes. This is a picture of the cast from the first time that we did the Victorian funeral customs. combination of some of the lecture type thing, but there was some special music, there were some interpretive readings. Again, well received by the public, a little less so the second go around, but it,
All look very natural.
don't we? And what you really can't see in the picture is you cannot smell the ham sandwiches from the luncheon.
But there are a lot of ham there.